I love data like
Oh,
that,
I
so
do
I
too.
want to really get into the
Yeah.
data and see what we can
Now,
find.
talking about the Healthy Work Environment Survey, share with us a little bit about this.
Well, in 2005, AACN published their first healthy work environment standards. And at the time, there wasn't a lot of evidence on it. And then in 2006, they decided that they really needed to know what the work environment looked like and hear directly from nurses with boots on the ground. You know, the staff nurses, the people who are doing the doing every day. And then we did another study in 2008. We did one in 2013, and now we've got this one in 2018. So I tell people the 2006 study was a snapshot. It's like taking a picture on vacation. The 2008 study let us do a little comparison, but when we did the 2013, now we could start looking for trends, and now in 2018 we can definitely look at trends. And as far as I know, AACN is the only organization or group that has done that many studies on the work environments of nurses and has that kind of data available. And we progressively have had more and more nurses responding to the survey every time we do it. So this time we've got 8,000 nurses plus who responded to the survey. And it's a very long, detailed survey.
We know that nurses are used to filling out a lot of forms,
They are.
answering a lot of questions,
They are.
and they see the value of this
Yeah.
because they want changes.
I think they also know that when we did all the other studies, we published the data and we used the information. And so I think that's really important because sometimes when people do surveys and then the people don't see the information,
Right.
then they think, why should I fill out the next one?
Can you share some of the data with us?
I can. When we first did it, we were looking for baseline. You know, what did it really look like out there? You think you know, you have a lot of anecdotal information, but we wanted solid data to say this is what nurses themselves are reporting to us. We didn't see huge amounts of change between 2006 and 2008, but that was kind of holding serve given the conditions that were going on then with the nursing shortage. In 2013, we did see some changes. We saw a lot of drop off in the ratings of the work environment. If you think about that time, the economy was going down, and at the same time, nurses were going back to work because of that. So if you worked part-time, you went back to full-time. If you were full-time, you did overtime because you were trying to supplement the money. And we had managed to bring enough people into nursing schools so that now we had more than enough graduates coming out for a short period of time. Now you've got a scenario where you've got very low vacancy rates. You've got people waiting in line to take jobs. I think in that situation, you don't pay as much attention to recruitment or retention, and healthy work environment is part of both of those. So I think that's why we saw the drop off in 2013. We're now seeing it come back towards the 2006, 2008 numbers. So we're seeing some pretty big improvements in some of the areas between 2013 and 2018.
Tell me some of the things that contribute to an unhealthy work environment.
It's interesting because anything that contributes to an unhealthy work environment contributes to a healthy work environment, right? In the reverse direction.
Exactly.
But what we find is when staffing is inappropriate, and at this point we've defined inappropriate as less than 75% of the time you have the right nurses with the right knowledge and the right skills. So it turns out that only 39% of the respondents said that occurred in their units. So less than half the time you have adequate staffing 75% of the time. So that's not too good. The scarier thing is that 32% of the respondents said that they had adequate staffing less than 50% of the time. So 1/3 of the time, nurses say they're not adequately staffed. That's pretty scary if you're a patient. It's pretty scary if you're a nurse because staffing isn't just about patients. Staffing's about nurses because when staffing is not adequate, nurses don't practice at the top of their license. They get done what they can get done. They have to do tasks. You know, they have to clean a trach, they have to change a dressing, they have to do those things. But what they don't get done is the things that only nurses can do, the critical thinking things, the discharge planning, the comforting, the teaching the patients and families. And so they're not practicing at the top of their license, and when they're not practicing at the top of the license, nurses aren't as satisfied with their job.
Exactly.
So staffing is more than staffing, if you get what I mean.
More than just numbers.
It's more than just numbers, and it's more than just about enough people to take care of the patient because it reflects on everything in the work environment. And so that was one of the areas we found. The other thing that we found was verbal abuse, physical abuse, discrimination, and sexual harassment. I was particularly surprised because the discrimination numbers went up. In every study we've done, we've seen a level of verbal abuse. Not acceptable, but we've seen it. And we've seen a level of physical abuse. Again, not acceptable, should be a zero tolerance issue, but we've seen it. But we have not seen this much discrimination reported. The thing we did different in this study than we've done in the first three is we actually asked people how often did it occur to you in the last year. Because in the previous studies, we said, have you experienced, for example, verbal abuse in your past year while you're working as a nurse? In this case, we said, tell us how many times if the answer is yes. If it happened once a week, somebody told us 52 times in a year, right? And so we went up to the number 200, so we kind of topped it off at that. But we had 6,017 nurses respond to that question, and they reported over 198,000 incidents of verbal abuse, physical abuse, discrimination, and sexual harassment. So that's big, and that's something we obviously have to address, and all of nursing, I think, knows we have to address that. I got to meet Alex Wobbles last night, the nurse from Utah who had the incident with the police and the patient. And one of the things we were talking about was she said, you know, I wrote down all the stuff that I knew had happened in the incident right after it, but if we hadn't had the tape, it wouldn't have resonated so much with people. But if we didn't see it, it's hard for people to envision it. It's like the nurse here in Massachusetts that got stabbed 17 times. We've seen pictures of where she was stabbed, but when you see the footage, you can then visualize it yourself and think about it.
It makes it real.
It makes it very real.
It's not just you read it in the paper.
Exactly.
You see it.
It's exactly why we use simulation and why we use preceptors and we put students in the clinical area. You can read it all in the book, but until you do it for real, it doesn't connect with you, right? We asked people if they had zero tolerance policies in their organizations for verbal abuse and physical abuse. And somewhere between 17 and 20% in every study we've done say they don't know if they have a policy. If they don't know, it doesn't exist because they don't feel supported by it. So that may be one of the first places to start, is let's just make sure people have policies that apply to everyone. The other issue is we looked at satisfaction. We always want to see how satisfied nurses are. And every study I've ever done, you know, you hear people in conversations will say nurses are leaving nursing. Nurses aren't leaving nursing. No study has ever shown that nurses are leaving the profession of nursing. In fact, we have one of the highest labor participation rates of any occupation. What nurses are leaving is their current positions, and what nurses are leaving sometimes is hospitals, because there are a lot of things nurses can do. You know, if you're a nurse and you know how to take care of critical care patients and do all that time management and all that planning and all that work, or if you're a med-surg nurse and you know how to take care of more patients on a unit, you can pretty much run the world. Nurses aren't limited to working in hospitals, and they've gone to work in other places that don't make them work night shift and weekends and short-staffed and all of those things. So I really want to dispel the myth that nurses are leaving nursing, because they really aren't. When you say that, people think, oh, well, they're retiring because they're getting older. That's not what our data says.
Does a nurse ever retire?
Nurses never retire. We just never.
Once
ever
a nurse,
retire.
always a nurse.
Right. So and then sort of the last part is we do have 54% of the nurses in the study saying they're going to leave their position in the next 3 years. So that's something organizations need to plan for. And then we have the data that says if you're in a beacon unit or if you're in a unit that's implemented healthy work environment standards, you report a much better work environment than in other units. So those are the highlights. You know, there's a ton of other data looking by generations and things like that, and how people feel, and nurse managers, but those are the highlights.
If somebody wants to see the data from the first three, where can they find those?
We published the data in 2013 in the Critical Care Nurse Journal.
Okay.
I think the other thing is AACN has an online assessment that hospitals can use to assess their work environment and get some ideas on where they might have weaknesses or, you know, opportunities for improvement, and that's available online at their site. So,
well, thank you so much
You're
for taking
welcome.
time to
You're
stop by
welcome.
and talk to us.